Welcome to my series of basketball videos where I'll be comparing various NBA greats against each other. I'm doing this because I find that a lot of the basketball videos comparing players on YouTube are too focused on the big names and sometimes compare players from different positions. Lots of people compare Jordan to LeBron and Kobe to Duncan, for example, due to their similar levels of achievements, but since those players play different positions and have different styles of play, it's not an interesting comparison. In this series, I want to do comparisons between not just more well-known players, but players from days past, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the ABA as well, that most modern fans probably do not have too much knowledge about. Also, as much as possible, I want to compare players that play similar positions and/or similar play styles. To me, that's a more interesting and fruitful comparison. I'll be using 8 different metrics to judge each player. Scoring. This category will be defined by each player's career points per game, peak points per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of scoring titles. Rebounding. This category will be defined by each player's career rebounds per game, peak rebounds per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of rebounding titles. Passing. This category will be defined by each player's career assists per game, peak assists per game, both in regular season and playoffs, and number of assist titles. Efficiency advanced metrics. This category will be defined by each player's career true shooting percentage, PER, and win shares per 48. Reason I use true shooting percentage is because it's more fair to guards. Defense. This category will be defined by each player's all defensive selections, defensive win shares, and defensive player of the year awards. The reason I'm not using blocks, steals, or defensive box plus minus is because I want to compare the achievements of older players that modern fans might not have too much knowledge about, and players in the 1960s and early 1970s do not have these stats tracked. Awards. This category will be defined by all-star appearances, all-NBA selections, MVPs, finals MVPs, and championships as a top 3 player. The reason I have to count championships as a top 3 player on the team is because otherwise you'll get into the situation where, for example, Robert Horry has 7 rings and Karl Malone has 0, and it's not representative of how much better a player is if you weren't a top 3 player on that team contributing to a championship. Also, I'll be including ABA stats and awards and using them equivalent to their respective NBA stats and awards. Also, no All-NBA third team selections are included because All-NBA third teams weren't added until the late 1980s, which is unfair to older players. Playoffs. This category will be defined by how many Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals and Finals a player has been to, and how many championships they won as a top 3 player on the team. Yes, this is supplementary to the awards category because it also rewards players for making it far in the playoffs, even if they don't necessarily win at all. Totals. This category will be defined by longevity, how many total points, rebounds, assists, and win shares a player has accumulated throughout their career, and rewards a player's durability. After all, a lot of people say the best ability is availability. And of course, this is only going to be my opinion from comparing the available metrics, since I've not watched most of these players live or even been born when some of these players have been playing. And to keep it fair, I'm judging them based on how they did in their own era. There's no comparing what this NBA player played in today's era or the 1960s, none of that. It'll be strictly based on their stats and accomplishments within their own era against that era's competition, which makes the most sense to me. So I hope you guys enjoy this comparison video and hopefully learn something new from it. In the 45th episode of the series, we take a look at 2 point guards who were great team players, won championships and finals MVPs, yet often get overlooked in NBA history. JoJo White was known as the star point guard of the 1970s Boston Celtics, teaming up with John Havlicek and Dave Cowens to form a potent force, winning 2 NBA championships together. He was an unassuming but reliable and an unselfish player who was a perfect fit for the Celtics' hardworking mentality. Chauncey Billups was also an unassuming but reliable and unselfish player who played on many different teams, but is probably best known for his stint with the 2000s Detroit Pistons, also known for a hardworking blue-collar mentality much like the Celtics. But which player had the greater career? Let's find out. In the scoring category, while neither player was the primary scorer for their team, they could definitely handle secondary scoring duties. White averaged 17.2 points per game for his career, peaking at 23.1 points per game in 1972, raising it to 21.5 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 24.5 points per game in 1973. Billups averaged 15.2 points per game for his career, peaking at 18.5 points per game in 2006, and raising it to 17.3 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 22 points per game in 2002. Both of these players could raise their scoring in the playoffs when their teams needed it. Both were considered clutch players, and Billups even got the nickname Mr. Big Shot for his ability to step up when his team needed it the most. However, I would say that out of the two, White was the more consistent scorer, as Billups averaged over 18 points per game just twice in his career, while White has 7 seasons averaging over 18. So while both players were decent scorers, White has consistently higher averages across the board, so this category will go to him. In the rebounding category, White averaged 4 rebounds a game for his career, peaking at 5.6 per game in 1973, and 4.4 rebounds a game in the playoffs, peaking at 5.4 a game in 1972. Billups averaged 2.9 rebounds a game for his career, peaking at 3.7 a game in 2003, and 3.4 rebounds a game in the playoffs, peaking at 5 per game in 2002. Both players were more or less average rebounders for a point guard position, but White does get a few more per game across the board, seems to be a bit more consistent with grabbing the boards, so this category will go to JoJo White. In the passing category, both players were solid passers as both were mainly point guards throughout their career. White averaged 4.9 assists per game for his career, peaking at 6.1 assists per game in 1973, and 5.7 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 6.4 a game in 1973. Billups averaged 5.4 assists per game for his career, peaking at 8.6 per game in 2006, and 5.7 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 6.8 per game in 2009. While White was a solid passer for a point guard, Billups was just a little bit better at playmaking and distributing, and this reflects in his higher peaks across the board. Thus, this category will go to Chauncey Billups. In the efficiency and advanced metrics category, it's not very close, as while both players were quite average efficiency from the mid-range for their era, Billups' advantage in three-point shooting and free throw shooting definitely gives him an overall efficiency advantage, and is reflected in all three advanced metrics categories here, so the edge goes to Billups here. In the defense category, it's interesting because although Billups was known as a very solid defender, earning 2 all-defensive selections, and his 2000s Detroit Pistons team was known for their suffocating defense and being one of the greatest defensive teams ever, JoJo White was also a very underrated defender, which reflects in how close their defensive win shares were. While not quite as stellar as his teammates John Havlicek or Dave Cowens on defense, White definitely was a solid defender as well, even if he lacks the all-defensive selections. Thus, I'll have to call this category a tie. In the awards category, it's interesting because both players won Finals MVP while not being the main star for their teams. JoJo White won Finals MVP for having played a brilliant 7-game series against the Phoenix Suns in 1976 Finals, including a famous 60-minute Game 5 that went into triple overtime, although he was not the superstar that John Havlicek or Dave Cowens were. Chauncey Billups similarly won Finals MVP for his great all-around contributions to his team, playmaking, hitting big shots, and playing great defense in the 2004 Finals. Although he wasn't the defender that Ben Wallace was, or the scorer that Rip Hamilton was, he was just the best all-around player for the Pistons. It's close, but for this comparison, White had 2 more All-Star selections, an additional All-NBA second-team selection, and an additional championship which he was a top 3 player for. Thus, the slight edge will have to go to JoJo White here. In the playoffs category, both players had considerable playoff success. White went to 3 conference finals and 2 finals, but Billups went to 5 conference finals, including 7 in a row, including the 2 finals trips he made. The 2000s Pistons was truly a force to deal with, as no other Eastern Conference team was as dominant as them in terms of consistent playoff success during that decade. Billups' 2 additional conference finals appearances, including one with Carmelo Anthony's Denver Nuggets, give him the edge here, so this category will go to him. In the longevity category, Billups played for roughly 200 more games than White, and thus racked up more totals in every category compared to White, so this category will have to go to him. So when all the categories are summed up, JoJo White takes the scoring, rebounding, and awards categories, while Chauncey Billups takes the passing, efficiency, totals, and playoffs category, with defense being a tie, giving Chauncey Billups the edge. Both of these players were unselfish team players that I felt got overlooked in NBA history, and despite having Finals MVPs, both of them had to wait quite a while for their Hall of Fame induction, but I'm glad both finally got in. JoJo White's contributions as the 3rd star in the 1970 Celtics teams was invaluable for that team's success, and along with his co-stars John Havlicek and Dave Cowens, helped lead them to 2 championships during that decade. He was a solid secondary scoring option, a decent playmaker, and a solid defender for the team. Chauncey Billups was a player that, despite his unimpressive numbers, helped make every team he was on better. He was a big-time shot maker, a reliable playmaker, and a solid defender, and that helped him reach an impressive 7 conference finals in a row in the 2000s. I hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. Hope you guys learned something new. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next comparison video.